5 things Christians should know about depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety tend to be some of those touchy subjects that are tough to tackle from a Christian perspective. It's not complicated just because the illness themselves are so complex, manifesting themselves in myriad ways, but also because perspectives about mental disorders vary greatly throughout the church. This isn't to paint the church with broad strokes. Incorrect beliefs about mental illness are pervasive throughout our culture. However, some of the churchy misconceptions about clinical depression and anxiety spring from a genuine desire to understand them scripturally. It's necessary to generalize a bit to understand these attitudes. There are things well-meaning Christians tend to get wrong. Of course, there is way more information about anxiety and depression than what can be summed up in this video, so it's certainly worth doing more research on the subject. But if we as the church are going to start talking about these issues, here are a few things we should know. Number 1, depression isn't what the church sometimes makes it out to be. It's not a character defect, a spiritual disorder, or an emotional dysfunction. And chief of all, it's not a choice. Asking someone to try not being depressed is tantamount to asking someone who's been shot to try and stop bleeding. Such an attitude can dangerously appear in the church as, if only you had enough faith. Cue the record scratch for any Christian regarding matters of healing. Having faith in God's ability to heal is hugely important, and personal faith can help ease depression. But to deny medical or psychiatric treatment to someone suffering from mental illness is really no different than denying them to someone with a physical illness. The difference between the two is that the former is invisible. Speaking of the invisible, some faith traditions are quick to suggest demonic attack as the cause for depression. While I'm convinced that there's definitely a spiritual element, the enemy will exploit any weakness. Medical science holds that major depressive disorder is real and the cause are manifold. Number 2, mental illness is not a sin. Yes, sins in the past like physical abuse, substance abuse, and neglect may contribute to depression. And these sins often continue as coping mechanisms to those suffering from mental illness. Yet this doesn't make the sufferer of depression and anxiety a sinner simply for experiencing the crushing effects of their condition. What happens when mental illness is treated as an unconfessed, unaddressed sin is alienation. Viewing depression as a sin in and of itself prevents individuals from seeking treatment. It also ignores the fact that many Christians may respond to depression in unhealthy ways if the root cause is ignored or misunderstood. 3, the Bible doesn't provide easy answers. The Word is full of wisdom and encouragement for those suffering from depression and anxiety disorders, but it doesn't come in one verse doses. Be anxious for nothing and do not worry about your life can easily be taken out of context, which is problematic. First, and importantly, doing so fails to appropriately handle Scripture, carelessly misconstruing the larger intent of the passages. Another really scary thing this does is it can convince a person in the worst throes of their illness that they're not obeying God. Add that to what feels like the inability just to be. Every shaky breath hurts and getting out of bed is impossible, and you've thrown gasoline onto the fire. A true examination of depression and anxiety in the Bible shows the existential dread that accompanies the illness instead of an easy out, one and done antidote. God's hand isn't always apparent, as Dan Blazer pointed out in Christianity Today. Most of us have no idea what David meant when he further lamented, "I am forgotten by them as though I were dead." Severe depression is often beyond description. Rather than prescribing a bit of a verse divorced from its context, a better strategy is to look at those instances of mental suffering along with the church body and to offer comfort in the fact even the saints struggled. Number 4 is anxiety and depression don't look how we often think. And number 5 is strong churches don't fix depression. Click the link in the description to read the full story.